President, I want to be able to comment on my colleague, Senator Portman, and some of the comments he's made about unemployment. My state's not one of those states yet that has made the decision to be able to end the additional unemployment benefits that are coming from the federal government. And it's harming workers, and it's harming jobs, and it's harming businesses in my state. And I hope in the days ahead, my state will be one of those states to be able to step up and will say, and I believe my governor will be able to step up and say, let's actually make sure we're benefiting families long term. There's a whole group of folks that believe that if you only give people enough money, that's going to help them rise out of poverty. People need a job. People need a purpose. People need a plan to be able to do that. Folks don't need long-term government benefits to be able to help sustain that. They need a way to be able to help earn a living, to be able to pass it on to their family and set a job record for them and to set a path for their kids and for their grandkids after them. That helps people rise. Every study we've seen on how to help people rise out of poverty, graduate high school, wait till after marriage to have kids, and have a job of any type. Let's help people rise. Let's help people be employed and engaged. That's a helpful thing. As I think about some of the things that are happening even today, Secretary Mayorkas was in front of our committee today, and it was shocking to me to hear the Secretary of Homeland Security talk about how much more efficient they become at processing people at the border and getting them into the country. It used to be our evaluation for how we were managing Border Patrol and Customs and Border Protection was how many people we were stopping at the border and returning to their home country. He literally over and over again articulated how much faster they are now at processing people at the border and releasing them into the country. Even at one point, when I challenged him and said, I understand people are being released in the country without even a notice to appear, that they're just being released in the country and told to go to a place somewhere in the country, self-report themselves to an ICE office and say, I'd like to get a court order to be able to have a notice to appear. At that point, I said, how many people have been treated that way? He said, I'm not sure. Well, I've already looked up the record on it. It's 19,000 just in the past couple of months that have been brought across the border, released into the country, and told just self-report yourself to whatever ICE agent you see somewhere in the country. I asked the simple question, how many people have already done that? Not only could he not answer the number 19,000, which we have confirmed, but he didn't know how many people had actually turned themselves in and actually done it. But we continued to do this. It was all about speed of moving people that are crossing the border into the country rather than actually managing our border. And even something as simple as just the gaps in the fence that they're still, as he said to me, studying whether they're going to close the gaps in the fence. We have a gas pipeline that has gone down to a ransomware attack. It reminded me again of how important gas pipelines are all over our nation. And it's interesting to me that on day one of the first things that President Biden did was he stepped in and ended the Keystone Pipeline moving through here and is now actively working to be able to shut down all pipeline construction around the country. Can I remind Americans, especially Americans on the East Coast, what it means to lose a pipeline? When the president says we're not going to do more pipelines, that means we have no redundancy, that if a pipeline goes down, there's not an additional backup one in construction to be able to get there. It's better to have multiple pipelines in an area, so if one goes down, you've still got other fuel supplies. What if this pipeline had actually been a larger scale issue, even than a ransomware attack, as bad as that is? This whole fight that we're having about pipelines suddenly makes sense to a whole lot of folks on the East Coast that can't get gasoline. Pipelines are not evil. Pipelines are moving energy across the country, and it's the least expensive, safest way to be able to move that energy across the country. And this week of all weeks, it's been interesting to have a dialogue about Senate Bill 1, a long markup in the Rules Committee to be able to talk about voting in America. Now, I was at the White House several years ago when the First Step Act was signed. It was a remarkable bill dealing with criminal justice reform. And as I was at that White House signing ceremony and that gathering of all these different folks that had been engaged, it was interesting to me to stand in that room with President Trump and to have folks from the Heritage Foundation and folks from the ACLU in the same room, shaking hands, smiling, and saying, this is a good piece of legislation. In fact, it's the only time that I can remember sitting at a signing ceremony, watching people from two different perspectives say they both support something so strongly. That was the First Step Act. I have now seen my second time that that's occurred, when both the Heritage Foundation and the ACLU both oppose Senate Bill 1 and H.R. 1. They both come out in opposition to this. Well, that's an interesting gathering of folks to be able to gather together from both political extremes to be able to look at a piece of legislation, all 880 pages of it, and to say, that's a bad idea. Why would they say that? Well, let me count the ways of why they would say that. In my state, in Oklahoma, we have great voting engagement, good. We want to make it easy to vote. We want to make it hard to cheat. We want as many people as possible to be able to vote and as many people as possible to be able to engage in the process. That's the nature of a republic like ours. You need people to be able to be engaged. But we also want to be able to follow up on that process as well, to be able to make sure if someone's actually breaking the rules on that, we follow up. And in our state, we do. Recently, I followed up with our state leadership for voting to be able to find out what happened in our last election, what are we doing. We found 57 people as a state that voted twice in my state. All 57 of those names are turned over to local district attorneys, and they'll start following up with those individuals because that's a violation of the law to be able to vote twice in our state. 57 names is not very many, but it's because we continue to enforce the law in our state to be able to make sure that we have as many people voting as possible, but also accountability for people that want to be able to cheat in the system. The interesting thing about Senate Bill 1 and House Bill 1 is that they make it much easier to cheat in the process. They set up a different system where you can actually have no voter ID on it. And it's not just no voter ID, it's no voter ID and same-day registration combined. So you can literally walk into a polling place that you're not registered for, not show an ID and say, I'm not registered, I'd like to vote, and not show an ID and also vote same day in that spot. There's no way to be able to verify then, one way or the other, if this person's voting twice, because no one knows. In my state that has great voter ID laws, it would gut that and would take it away from our state, though no one's complaining about voter ID in my state. This Senate Bill 1 also creates ballot harvesting, forces it around the entire country. Now, folks may say, I have no idea what that is. Well, let me set up what it is. Ballots are mailed to your house, and if you haven't mailed it back in yet, you may have a knock at the door to come to your door. And as they come to the door, it'd be a political activist from one of the campaigns, and they would say, hey, have you filled out your ballot yet? I know they got mailed out yesterday. Have you turned it back in yet? Oh, you haven't? Grab your ballot inside, bring it out on the front porch, and I'll help you fill it out right here at your front porch. And I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll also go turn it in for you. You won't even have to mail it. I'll go deliver it for you. That's ballot harvesting. Most states, that's illegal. They want to make that legal in every single state. That is an invitation to fraud. Now, there is a difference between I want to help facilitate everyone to be able to vote and to be able to protect their rights to vote, and actually creating opportunities for fraud where everyone doubts every election. That's not the right way to be able to go. I want to make sure that we all look at an election at the end of it and to say we can trust that. One of the ways that we can trust it is through a federal election commission that actually is bipartisan. We have a federal election commission, even number of Republicans, Democrats. Oh, they want to change that to where it's 5 members, not 6, and the last member that's the tiebreaker is someone selected by the president. That would be quote unquote independent. I'm sure that's going to work out just fine, that that's not going to end up being a partisan individual. In my state, all the ballots are done ahead of time, all of them. If you do a mail-in ballot, those ballots are opened up early on. There's Republican and Democrat. There are poll watchers that are watching it. All the evaluation for the quality of that ballot are all tested before election night. So that's all finished. So when election night is done, by 10:30 in the evening, all the ballots have been counted, election results are out. Oh no, that won't work. My Senate Democrat colleagues want to give an additional 10 days for ballots to continue to be able to trickle in. So literally what we had in this last election, where it was for days, no one even knew how many ballots were coming in, and the uncertainty that that creates in the process, they want to make sure that exists in every state, not just in a few states. Listen, I'd rather have every state be like mine, to say everyone has to turn their ballot in early. It's not like Election Day is a shocking day that no one knew about. In fact, the majority of states around the country are like my state. This is not just a partisan issue. Vermont has the same rule that we have in Oklahoma. This is a straightforward way to be able to protect the integrity of the ballot, that you can turn in the ballots early, that you can evaluate all of them so the ballots aren't trickling in for days. If you love all those rules, let me give you one more quick one. You remember that campaign speech or that campaign commercial that you really, really hate, that you're sick of it by the time the election comes? Well, get ready for a whole lot more of them, because Senate Bill 1 gives federal dollars 6-to-1 to be able to fund more campaigns, to make sure campaigns have even more money. So if someone raises $100,000, they're going to give federal tax dollars $600,000 to that candidate. Even the candidate you didn't vote for, don't like. They're going to get $600,000 for every $100,000. They raise $1 million for their campaign, they'll get $6 million of federal tax dollars. I don't want to pay for campaigns I don't agree with. I don't think that's the right way to go. And I don't bump into many people in my state that get real excited about voting for or about paying for someone else's campaign that they disagree with. Now, you might think that this bill was a result of the 2020 election, that they pulled it out and said that election was such a shambles, we need to be able to put a bill out there to do that. But you'd be incorrect. Actually, this bill is exactly what they pulled out in 2017, saying that Russia took over the election in 2016, so we need a big bill to be able to fix it. And for 4 years, they've been pushing it, and now after this election, they pulled it out again and said, we've got to be able to do this. It's the same bill. It used to be the bill to fight Russia. Now it's the bill to be able to fight whatever now. Listen, let each state make those decisions. And when there's a challenge for that, take it to federal court. That's why we have the court system. Allow those federal courts to be able to process through those challenges. We want every person to be able to be protected, to be able to vote. And if some state is suppressing the vote, take that to federal court and let's solve that, and to be able to make sure that does not occur. But don't tell everyone in my state, Washington, D.C. knows better. We have Republicans and Democrats that have worked very hard on election law in my state. In fact, there was just an expansion of additional days for early voting in my state. It's been a nonpartisan issue in my state. Let's not make it a partisan issue now and tell everyone across the entire country, D.C. knows best. Let's put this bill aside and not pass Senate Bill 1. With that, I yield the floor.